Anderson?
Issue 13.
Oh, yeah. Apps.
Yes, so I will, did you want the Attorney General here for that discussion?
Well, I think it'd be really important.
All right, so if you don't mind, if we could quickly go to that one.
Certainly.
Even though it's not part of your update. So, but thank you for the update, and we will now go to item, issue 13, the app system. And I think that, so Mr. Lindley, you can present, though I think that you don't need to go into a lot of detail, because I think that Senator Anderson's, he may have specific questions, so you be relatively brief, then he'll ask questions and we can get into it more.
Madam Chair, if I could ask, if Senator Anderson wants to ask some particular questions that might be directed at me, I can try to answer those and then leave my team in place if they want to get into more specifics. I just want to be mindful that I will be trying to catch a flight.
I was hoping that that's what we could do.
Okay.
And the biggest concerns I have is the workforce, because we've had discussions about that in the past.
Yes.
What they can and cannot do.
Okay.
And then a lot of the other numbers I can work through with the staff. But
Okay.
I think that because you are the big cheese, you should be here for the employment aspect.
Let's do it.
So if I could just, out of sake of time, if we could skip over to the positions opened, why they're filled at the level there are, and what steps you're taking to get them. That would be very, very helpful, because I think that that's one of the problems that we're looking at.
So are we talking about the special agent positions that are vacant as a part of the APPS program? So currently we have 5 vacant special agent positions in our APPS program. We are working diligently in order to fill those positions. There are some obstacles with recruiting that not only the Department of Justice has, but a lot of local law enforcement, as well as the AG said previously. Pay issues is a problem for our recruiting. And then under the current contract, when agents want to transfer out of the Bureau, they're allowed to do that. That was an issue with this committee going back probably 4 or 5 years. So we worked with the union, and now when a special agent comes into the Bureau of Firearms, they need to stay there for at least 2 years before they can transfer. And over the years, we've seen less and less agents transfer out. Part of that was also with the issues with the limited term positions that was again solved by this committee. Limited term positions are very difficult, especially in the special agent classification, to fill and to keep. So with the addition of the 22 full-time permanent positions, that helped our attrition rate greatly.
When we had this discussion last time, one of the concerns was the cost of training. And I believe at the time it was over $20,000. What's the cost of training today in background checks for a new hire?
So I would say it's relatively stable at about $20,000. We have, the background check process is lengthy and expensive, but also vital to make sure that we have the best personnel coming on board that are free of issues in their life. So when it comes to the training that we can do in-house, we found ways and locations to cut costs as much as we can. We're utilizing some of the other facilities that are within the state's umbrella, with the California Highway Patrol, the CAL FIRE locations, to make sure that we're reducing our costs as much as we can.
One of the issues was a lot of the departments were plucking agents out of the department once they were trained. So I think that you testified that in one case, the person had spent fewer than 24 hours in the new position before he took a position in another department. Have we solved that completely? Because at the time, I suggested that we charge the new department the cost, because we had gone through, I think, almost 60% of the budget that was put aside, and we weren't close to accomplishing the goal. So are we no longer training everybody for all the other departments, or are we recouping the money, or what's happening with that?
So with the agreement with the union that covers our special agents, that was largely taken care of with the 2-year requirement. Two, with the permanent positions that was made available by this committee, with the 22 permanent positions, that also solved the problem. And just during the time frame that we first received the SB 140 money, the department was recovering from the layoffs that were imposed during the 11-12 fiscal year. So those things have largely subsided since then, and we have a relatively stable workforce.
So in my notes here, it shows that there's 32 positions. Is the difference between the full-time and this part-time positions or temporary positions?
No, some of those other positions were positions that we already had as part of the APPS program prior to SB 140. So all the positions that we currently have assigned to the Armed Prohibited Persons System are permanent positions.
Okay. And then I noticed, according to what I have here, you have 30 of the 32 positions filled. You're at 94%, which is terrific. But in 16-17, you only had 15 of those positions filled. It's a great step up, but then when we look at the production over how we've gone after these apps in the backlog, we've taken a big step backwards. So could you walk me through how that occurred? Because in 2017, we reduced the backlog by over 2,000. In 2018, we reduced the backlog by 400. If we went back to 2016 and 2015, when you only had 12 positions approved and only 8 people filling those positions, you were doing between 4,000 and 5,000 in the reduction. So we've gone from 4,000 to 5,000 with half the employees, or less than half, fewer than half the employees, than where we are today when we only can produce 400.
So a number of factors are in there, so I can kind of lay through the steps there. One, we used a lot of overtime, which was discussed, I believe, in the 16, in our budget hearing in 16, a lot of overtime was being utilized. Number two, this was kind of an all hands on deck priority for the Attorney General's office, for the Division of Law Enforcement, and for the Bureau of Firearms to work as many cases as possible during that time frame. Number two is during that time frame, we also were looking at about 3,000 to 4,000 people a year that were being added to the Armed Prohibited Persons System overall. Now we're looking at about 7,000 people a year. So we had a good run when we were able to work down the backlog, but based on current staffing levels that we have right now, it's hard to keep that level at the 10,000 or so people in the active portion of the apps database, because we're seeing 4 more people being added to the system. Part of that is because of long gun retention that started in 2014, and then part of that is just the massive gun sales that we've seen over the last 4 to 5 years.
When I looked at the incoming cases, though, in 2012, you had a 2,200 increase. Then when you go to 2013-14, it's 4,500, 4,600. And then we've hovered around 5,500 after that. So even in the peak years in 16 and 17, when we had fewer labor, we were still outproducing considerably. And when you think in terms of overtime, going from 8 employees to 30 employees, I mean, 8 times 3 is 24. So they would have to be working more than 24 hours a day to offset the workload, workability. I'm just wondering, what are we doing differently? Now, when we started this process before, and you were reluctant to send out letters, and we had an issue that I brought up back then of knocking down a door and using a lot of man hours to chase down a 70-year-old who had a 1968 1-ounce marijuana charge. And I questioned, why couldn't we send him a letter? Because he's no longer really a prohibited person once he fills out the paperwork. Because we know that that's no longer a felony. I don't even think it's a misdemeanor. So you did start the letter program. But how, and I know that you've made changes, and I've complimented you on some of those changes in the past, But it just seems like we're falling backwards again, and I'm trying to figure out how we can have more than 3 times the number of agents on this and have a reduction where we did 1.8% as opposed to, we've never had numbers that are these low before. And I get that, that in 2014, I think it was, that we started the long guns and included it. But even if you include all those numbers, when you count the number of bodies and the number of hours applied to this, we have not seen any progress, not any meaningful progress. And when I think about the rape kits, in which I complimented you on, this should be equally a priority as the rape kits. These people have been found to be mentally ill, they're felons, they're prohibited, they're a danger to themselves, they're a danger to others, and yet we are concerned about school shootings and the protection of our children, but I just don't feel like there's any kind of intensity of importance. And I'm wondering, with the numbers, when I go through them, I can't figure out why we perform so poorly.
Senator Anderson, let me see if I can try to give you an answer that comes from the perspective of someone who's been in the office now as the Attorney General for a little bit more than a year, and who wanted to dig into this because I agree with you. This should be and is one of the Department of Justice's priorities. And think of it as waves. You give us an authority to hire. We don't end up getting to hire until far later than the point where you gave us the authority to hire. And so there are waves. Long guns were added to the list of weapons that would be now subject to verification and inspection. The wave occurs when you start to be able to deal with all those folks who are now starting to file and report before we start to see the people we have to go out and investigate because they're now prohibited from retaining those weapons. And so it's a bit of a wave. The money that was allocated back in 2013 by SB 140 was 3 years. As I think Mr. Lindley indicated, it took us a while before we could hire, and it was tough to hire because it was temporary money. There aren't too many law enforcement agents who are going to leave a good-paying job and security to take a 3-year assignment and then not know what they'll do after that. So waves occurred. We've lost the funding that came from SB 140 because it was only 3 years. In fact, of the $24 million that we were supposed to get, we didn't get to use the $24 million. We only got $18 million of it because of the account didn't have the dollars in it to give us the chance to go towards the $24 million. So we never had a chance to do everything that was supposed to be done in 2013. But circumstances have continued to change. It's an evolving wave of activity. And I will tell you this, there aren't too many people who want to take an assignment when what you're told to do is essentially go see if you can retrieve a gun from someone who's a felon or is dangerous to you and others. And that's the assignment you have every day. What they do in removing weapons is incredible. Perhaps the best testament to how well they do it is the fact in all the years that we've had the APPS program in place, and again, we're the only state that does this, we've never had one incident where someone has gotten hurt as a result of our special agents going in to remove weapons from people who've lost the right to possess them. And we can go into the numbers with you, and I'm more than willing to have my team share with you everything you'd like, because I went through them as well. And what I can tell you is that what we're doing is work that we should continue, and I hope what we can do is do it in a way where everyone sitting in the legislature, sitting in our department, works out a way to make sure that we not only just continue the work and deal with any concerns that there may be, but we just go gangbusters on this one, because, as you said, there's still people out there.
So I appreciate everything you've said, but there's a lot of flaws in it. So from my perspective, in 2013, 2014, I joined and authored that bill to authorize the additional money, the 24.
Thank you for that.
Your total budget that year was $11 million. Today, your total budget is in excess of $11 million. Now, I get you've hired more people with that money because you have 30 people now doing the work that 8 people were doing before. but you didn't take a reduction in money. You took a short-term boost in money because the number of 24 million was given to us by your staff to clear the backlog, and we were promised within a year it would happen. That was not on your watch. I'm not holding you accountable for it.
Thank you for that.
And I did say something nice about the rape kits, but
Forensic evidence.
About the fourth time.
yeah, but looking at this, your budget hasn't declined, it's maintained its level, and yet the numbers are staggering low. And if you look at 2014 and the adding of long guns, it significantly hasn't changed it. What has changed is the department isn't nearly as aggressive as it once was. And the fact that if people have long guns hasn't significantly changed the numbers coming in. It's simply, I mean, it has increased it, but it hasn't doubled it. It's allowed you to go to a home where you found ghost guns. You only had 2 guns on record, and you collected, was it 42? How many guns did that gentleman have that you said?
28.
Yeah, 28. So when I go through this, and I'm taking your numbers from all your sites, and I'm adding them together, there's holes. And it could be that they're not being reported accurately, or it could be that people are saying stuff to you, and the reason why I'm so grateful that you're here is because when I'm sitting up here, it is very difficult for me to listen to how going from 8 people to 30 people, having a budget that's maintained within $1 million, 11 million back in 14 with 8, 11 million with 30, and yet we went from collecting 5,000 to 400. So, and when we get into some of the other aspects, it just doesn't add up.
Senator, let me try to give you a response that I hope can help us get to where we need to go. And the most important part of my response is this. I invite you to sit with our team, and so we could go through those numbers with a fine-tooth comb, because I think you were entitled to be able to do the math and add it up. That's what I've been asking my staff in the Department of Justice on all these different issues, because it has to add up. I agree with you completely on that. But let me suggest to you something. In 2013, the reason you were, and the legislature were willing to give the Department of Justice more money is because you recognized what our team essentially said back then. I wasn't here at the time, but said back then. This is a massive wave coming at us, and we're not handling it. We were, remember, to 2006, 2007, up until 2013, essentially, we were operating as if we were getting 1,000 to 2,000 new people in the apps database as prohibited people every year. And we were being overwhelmed by the number, and the backlog was growing year after year of the people that were never touched and investigated. That's where you then reacted and said, let's act. Here's the issue. It didn't just go up by 3 or so thousand every year. It went up dramatically. And let me show you a chart that shows the number of investigations that we have done over the years. These are just the investigations.
The problem with your statistic there is it shows open investigations. It doesn't show closed investigations. So you've opened a lot, and I give you credit. You know how to open them. You just don't know how to close them. See, because in 2017, you had over 10,000, subjects added to the apps list. In 18, you had 10,350. So the number was not that staggering. If you go back to even 2016, it was 8,000. So we haven't gone from 2,000 to 10,000. We've had a much smaller. If you look percentage-wise, as we're moving through, the numbers are staggering. That's why I'm so grateful that you're here, because you are very smart, and I just don't know that you really understand how difficult this is for anybody who looks at the numbers and starts to do the grind. And I'm thinking after this meeting, we're going to get this fixed fast.
We'll do this together.
Well, you don't need my help. You're more than capable.
Senator Anderson.
We just need to move forward in a way that actually delivers on capturing those weapons that are walking our streets, putting our lives at risk, and more importantly, could walk on a school campus at any time and unload. So while we're increasing laws on law-abiding citizens who have never done anything wrong, the very people that we know are a threat to our security are growing in numbers, and we're doing nothing about it. And when I look at this, and I look at the numbers they're taking. Now, you've opened a whole bunch of cases, but you haven't closed anything. And if you go back to 2017, the numbers are almost identical, and you only had, well, I'm just going to finish with this. You had 15 employees. In 18, you had 30. So you've doubled your employees, and your production went from 2,057 to 408.
So you really are capturing numbers without looking at them the way, as I said, they flow. You're looking at an instant in time. When you say only 408 were disposed of, you're not taking into account that you saw you're not taking into account the math that there were thousands of people who came onto the apps list.
Hundreds of thousands.
And we removed thousands of people, and we netted only a smaller number because the number of people who keep coming in keeps growing. Those are the waves. And if you look only at an instant in time and you pluck numbers, you're of course not going to see how it works.
We were more effective with 8 people than we are with 30.
Well,
If you go back and you use it as a percentage, because a percentage will adjust for the raw numbers. Even if your raw numbers increase, and I have the numbers, I'm looking at them, and yeah, I'm comparing 17 to 18 because those are really close to each other, and I get the wave. So let me ask you this, and go in a slightly different direction. How much money have you used with local government and local agencies? Because we authorized $5 million, and when I checked your website, you didn't spend any of it. So I'm wondering, under this magical, mystical thing here of waves, when do we actually apply the money that we were authorized to apply to actually go after these people and close these cases? You know, these are people with weapons. They're not walking around with wet noodles. These are people that are dangerous to our society. And you are very talented, but I really want to drill down because I think that when you get down and you look at the numbers and do it. Now, look, I never came from law enforcement. I'm not an attorney. But I did pass in finance. And I have a finance degree, and when I look and apply financial principles to this, the cost per unit and all those things, it's astounding that we've spent so much money, so much effort, and you have so little to show for it. And I get that some of these people, that you're going to go in and, you know, when I look, almost every year you have close to 3,000 or between 3,000 and 4,000 people that either are no longer a prohibited person because they were on our list backlogged during the whole time they were on the apps. Now they're no longer qualified for the apps, so they've come off naturally, or they've passed away. When that number is greater than the number that you're producing, that should be a signal that we're not giving it our full attention.
But it's not greater, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. You're not making a true comparison. And I'm more than willing to have my team sit down with you because, again, if you're looking at snapshots, you're not getting the full picture. Let me put it this way. We have teams who go out to inspect a premises to remove weapons from an individual. They go in. If they're not allowed in, they have to come back. They come back, and the person talks to them and says, well, I may have, I may not, may allow us to investigate and to search the premises, may not find the weapons. We still can't take the person off the list. Come back a third time. If they says, well, I think my brother-in-law might have the weapon. If you go down and search the brother-in-law's home, find no weapon, we still can't remove that person from the list. So you can touch these individuals numerous times and still have to keep the person on the list. And so if you don't take into consideration all that work that goes into this, then you're not getting a full scope of the tremendous work that folks are doing when tens of thousands of weapons have been removed from the hands of people who are prohibited from having them.
So then my last question then, well, 2 things. One, I think posting on the website in a clear fashion that all citizens can see and where this is will help clarify it, if we could do that. The second thing is, so am I to understand that this is such a daunting task that we can send a man to the moon, but we can't clear AMPS file? Because what I'm hearing from you is this is so daunting and so hard, yet we know that when the program first started, some of the things the department was doing could only be described as silly.
Senator, those men going to the moon didn't have to deal with folks who have committed felonies or who are dangerous and are in possession of weapons. It is tough work, and I defy anyone to put themselves inside those bulletproof vests that these young men and women get into every day and think that it's easy to do. And they do the best they can with the resources we give them. And I am more than willing, and every one of the men and women who serve with the Bureau of Firearms, I guarantee would be more than willing to be with you and talk about this, because I think the last thing they want, or you and I want, is for us to not allow this program to really get to the place it has to be, and that is that we feel comfortable that we're removing all weapons from people who've lost the right to possess them. So legitimate, law-abiding gun owners don't have to worry about that.
I never suggested the job was easy. I have nothing but respect for those folks. You know these people are dangerous. You know that they, at one point in their life, had possession of a weapon, whether they gave it away or not. They were in a possession of a weapon. I got to think that it's one of the toughest jobs out there because you don't know what's around the corner. But certainly, there has to be a dollar amount in a timetable that's achievable.
Agree.
So what is it?
We could sit down and try to figure that out, but it's hard to do it when you give us temporary dollars to achieve a permanent mission.
But you don't have temporary dollars.
So
We've
I
increased
want
the
to,
budget.
apologies, I have to intervene here. And the reason I have to intervene is because I really appreciate, Senator Anderson, your passion, and I share it. I want this to be, I want everyone who's on the APS list to get their weapons removed. But the reason I'm intervening is because you both keep referencing 30 positions. If you look at the item, it is actually 22 positions that we are being asked to make permanent. The chart that refers to 30 is for a different item, and it's a different division. So it is only 22 positions that we are discussing here. You're welcome. And I have a few other points, but I just wanted to put that out there right now so that we correct that record, and then I will make my other points. So, Senator Anderson, I will give you back the mic.
Well, I just say that if you could come up with a budget that would get us to protecting our communities from these folks, I'm not opposed to supporting it. I ran the bill with Senator Leno last time, but we've got to have a plan that can be executed with results.
And if I can just, Senator, just because I appreciate your saying that. And I hope what we do is take into account the changing nature of the work. So in 2013, no one knew that we were going to have long guns added to the list of weapons, which changed dramatically the number of people that started coming into APS. And so we have to be able to forecast better. So this way, when we give you a hard estimate, we're basing it on what we expect to have, because who knows what's, as you said, around the corner. We don't want to be broadsided. It's too important of a job.
I'm showing great restraint because I have
Certainly.
more numbers to go after.
Okay,
But
so then now I will, all right, so this is a oversight and information item because we don't have an action because we already made the 22 positions permanent, but it is 22 that we made permanent, not 30. All right, so that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make, while I completely agree with your objective, Senator Anderson, and I will re-emphasize this, I absolutely want DOJ to retrieve all of the weapons from everyone who is on the prohibited persons list. But I will point out that, as was described, there's a lot of steps involved. It's not just the steps of how many times it may take to send your officers out, but it's also first identifying who. So our process for gun purchasing is the information is the person goes, there's a waiting period, they do the background check and such, and in many cases the APS list is run simultaneously. Other times what we're doing is just looking at our list of gun ownership against people that may be newly added to the prohibited persons list versus at the point of sale. So there's a lot of steps involved here. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because in 2014, so in 2013, before we had added long guns, the division was only dealing with a max over the years. So in 2007, about 200,000, it stayed around the 200,000 range until it jumped up in 2012 to 388,000, then 400,000 in 2013. But when long guns were added, it jumped to close to 1 million. And since that time, each year, it's been close to 1 million. In other words, 1 million guns purchased that could be eligible for apps, thus adding additionally to the workload. Now, I know that's not completely analogous, but it does increase the workload. And when you look at the difference from the number of armed and prohibited persons identified versus the apps investigations conducted, the gap has dropped. It went from like 16K in 2014 down to 1,500K today. So while I do not want to see that 1,500K, I at least will give some credit that it has dropped. But I do agree with you that we want it 0. So I just think it was important to put it in that context.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did have the wrong graph. I had the graph ahead.
No worries.
But
No worries.
the numbers you're referring to, though, are the purchase and denials.
True.
Which are not
True.
apps.
Well,
so that-
actually, it's apps investigations conducted. So one number I would suggest was referring to as guns purchased. The others were the apps investigations conducted.
when we have the apps investigations conducted, so I could say, because I looked at those files that all have been opened, that's not a good measure of production, because I'm not trying to cook the books, but I certainly can cook the books by saying, well, I looked at 5 cases today. So now I get to put down, I did 5 cases. I think what we really want to focus on is the benefit of the end, which is fewer guns in the hands of dangerous people.
True.
And investigations does not solve that. The only number that I'm concerned about is how many guns are taken off the street.
Okay, appreciate that clarification. And I think obviously, you've heard loud and clear that it is a priority of the entire committee. And yes, and we do appreciate the update, and we look forward to next year's hearing, perhaps having a different number that we're discussing.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes, go ahead. Senator
add,
Anderson.
Attorney General Becerra, I know you're on a tight schedule. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, maybe miss your flight, just to be here for this discussion. I do think that there's a lot at play. It can be very confusing, but because you gave your absolute focus, I'm deeply appreciative. Thank you.
Senator Anderson, I'm looking forward to working with you on this.
All right. I believe we can allow Attorney General Becerra to leave. We do still have 3 other items that are just discussion, but I think you have other staff here that can handle that. And then, we have, yeah, those are just discussion. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much.
All right. So we will now go to issue 14, the antitrust workload.